Hi guys, it's time for another instalment of rule changes in football in England. If you've seen the intro, you'll know that this series is just about a few rule changes that I think will help make the game of football in England professionally slightly better and slightly more up to date with the current situation, how things have developed, okay? So, today we're going to be talking about financial plans for the Premier League. Now, not just the Premier League, but in recent years we've seen a hell of a lot of clubs go into administration and go close to going out of business in England because they haven't got enough money, or they've overspent and not been able to keep up with their payments on the loans. Portsmouth is the obvious example. They went from the Premier League down to League 2 this year. They've gone all the way through the English professional leagues because they couldn't afford to repay their debts when they were in the Premier League. Now, just going to explain something quickly before I get onto the point here, and this will be a big part of my plans, as if they're ever going to actually come into fruition, but up until this season, for the last, I think it was like 7 or 8 seasons, the Premier League had £1 billion football TV rights deal, which was shared equally between every club in the Premier League. And just a little side note, that's slightly different to how they do it in other countries, because in Spain each club sells their own TV rights, which means that the big clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona will sell theirs for hundreds of millions, but the smaller clubs won't really be able to sell them for much at all, which kind of locks in the big clubs to be in the big clubs and the little ones to be in the little ones because of the money they'll be getting in and what they can actually spend. But that's just a little side note. Anyway, £1 billion for the Premier League in TV rights, mostly from Sky, some of it from ESPN or BT Sport or whoever they are now. But this year, it all changed. A new deal was signed because the old one had come to an end, and the TV money went up from £1 billion a year to £3.5 to £4 billion a year. Now, that is a massive change. If you think before, £1 billion a year divided by 20, that's about, let me do it in my head quickly, it's about, is it, excuse me for 1 minute while I do the calculations. 1 billion. Nope, my phone can't do it. I think it was about 35 to 40 million pounds for each club, and that was fixed. That didn't matter where they came in the league. That was fixed. Every club at the start of the season gained 38, 39, 40 million pounds. Now, the TV money being quadrupled times by 4, if the rules stayed the same, which they have, that means that the amount of money each club would be getting would be times by 4 as well. So instead of getting 35, 40 million a year, those clubs will now be getting 90 to 150 million a year. That's a large range of numbers though. That's depending on whether it's 3 times or 4 times now. I don't know the exact numbers. And that means it's going to be impossible now for clubs coming up from the Championship to be able to stay in the Premier League, because the TV rights money in the Championship hasn't gone up, as far as I can tell, which means that the players they'll be able to get, the quality of players they'll be able to get in the Championship will be so hugely different to the Premier League that when a club goes up, they won't have a chance of staying up, because they will be, you know, years behind other clubs in terms of developing the quality of player you need for the Premier League. What I believe should have happened is to stop clubs going into financial problems and to keep the Premier League in touch with the rest of the Football League in England. The FA should have taken half of the TV money that came in from the new deal, half of it, so the clubs were still getting more, still getting twice as much money as they have already, but the FA now has £2 billion to play around with, and that could help stop clubs going to relegation. That could all go into a fund to support all the charities they want to support, big time. Could help fund all of the people that work for the FA, big time. And it can stop clubs going into financial trouble, because it could just go into a pot, and if clubs say we're in trouble, they could apply for some sort of grant where the FA would give them a loan so they don't go into administration, they don't go into liquidation or out of business, because no one wants to see that. But they're just paying it back to the FA, who would be a little bit more lenient than the banks maybe, because they can sympathise with the clubs more. But here's the big showstopper for me. What if that pot where they took half of the TV money, split in two again, and half of it, so estimated 750 million to £1 billion, went into youth development across the country? Same sort of system as the administration liquidation one, the bailout fund. Clubs could apply for a grant every year. Say, we've made this number of first team England players, over the years. Can we get this much money to help keep developing those players? And I think that would help not only football in the UK out, it would help the country's national team out, because you get more top players through, more players that can afford to stay in the game because clubs can afford to keep them. Because now right now at the moment in football, we're getting good players at the age of 18 and 17, 18 and 19 being thrown out of their clubs because there's nowhere for them to go. They can't go into the first team because they're not quite there yet, but they can't stay in the youth teams because they're too old now. So I think just a bit more money would help keep players more, would help develop those players, and would certainly mean that in the future the England national setup would have a much larger choice of players to pick from. I mean, if we look at that, England, you would say we've got maybe 18 to 20 players that can play on the international stage and look at home there because they're good enough. Whereas if you look at Spain, they have probably double that amount. They could pick twice as many players that would look comfortable and good enough to play on an international stage as we have. And that's just not good enough from our point of view, because when it comes to having a tournament, if we get a few players injured, we're down to the bare bones. Whereas Spain can just pick another world-class player to come and take whoever's injured's place in the team. But anyway, that's been my look at financial rules in the UK. It's probably been a little bit complicated, so if you can't stick with it, just leave a comment below and I'll try and explain it slightly simpler to you. Or I can try and get figures and do it a lot more complicated if you want that either. But as always guys, please like, please subscribe, please leave a comment if you've got rule changes that you think I should look into and do a video on in the future. Because I'm always interested to hear you guys' opinions. Obviously it's important to get the fans' opinions on what the game needs to do to keep moving on, to keep improving and to keep up with modern times. So thanks.